this one on, turn that one on, and we're on. Good morning. It is Wednesday, January 9th, 2019. Happy New Year. Welcome to the new year. We hope you had wonderful holidays with your family and you took some time off and you relaxed and you enjoyed. But we're happy to have you back in 2019. Happy to be starting the year with you. And always happy when you come and join us here on Java with Jerry. So welcome to the new year. We're laughing because we're telling stories. We're having a lot of fun already, and we hope you are with this new year too. So this is going to be kind of a fun show, and I'll tell you what we're going to do in January in a moment. But what's going to happen today? I'll tell you a little bit about the news. National, state, and local. As always, picked out a few stories to talk about, and then we're going to do our feature for today, which is going to be predictions for 2019. So here's my notion of what I think we'll do with January, since we're at the beginning of a new year. You send in any predictions you think are interesting. We have our staff who has predicted some things. We have others who are going to be sending in their predictions. I'll have some predictions of my own along the way, and we'll pick up some predictions from people who are out in pop culture or in the real world somewhere along the way, or that we hear. And if you hear one that you think is interesting, well, then you send it to us, and our staff will stick it in our list of predictions. Then what we're going to do is we're going to track the predictions we put on the air. This is sort of a memo to our producer, Erica, who is sitting here with her laptop on her lap. So we're going to track the predictions we make on the air, and throughout the year, if they come true or if they are completely obliterated by facts and events and will never come true, then we will bring them back to you and we'll compare and see how we're doing across the year. And we'll have some wild ones in here already this morning that we'll share with you. So we're going to do predictions, and then we have our millennial word of the day, which is the feature I decided to start with for the year. So there you are. That's what we're going to do today, and if we can squeeze that all in a half an hour, it'll be the first time I didn't overwrite a show. And I don't think that's the case, because look at this pile of stuff I got for myself. All right. We're happy to have you back. Let's start with the national news. And of course, the national story for this week, without a doubt, probably for the month, is the federal government shutdown and the showdown over it, which took quite the turn last night as the president made, for the very first time in his life, an address to the American people from the Oval Office. Kind of a heavyweight thing to do, which gives you a sense of how cornerstone he thinks this is to the promises that he made to his voters and to the American people, and how important he thinks border security is. And it was quickly addressed and responded to by the leaders of both the Senate and the Congress, which shows you how important they think it is. This is really sort of a red line in the sand for both of them. They, both on the left and the right, have to face this issue at the border. And it tells you how important the issue really is, because if it was less than that, the skirmish wouldn't have taken that kind of proportions in the press. So the president is demanding $5.7 billion, I think, is now his current ask. Some of that is not for border security in terms of a physical asset. Some of it is for interdiction to help with health care for people who are coming to the border and are ill. Some of it's for being able to house detainees while we process asylum applications, and some of it is for technology and the like. But all told, he's asking for $5.7 billion, and he's saying, look, in a setting in which illegal immigration, in his view, and by all statistics, costs about $150 million a month, asking for $5 billion is not a lot. And when we're talking about drugs that are coming into the country, and that's costing us close to $500 million daily, and thousands of lives, maybe we need to refocus some assets. And I laugh because there are bills that they will pass in the context of reopening the government that will have billions of dollars worth of waste in it. We'll be studying the mating of African flies or something, and nobody ever worries about that pork, but they're worried about the $5 billion he wants. Reopen the government, let people get back to work. There are 800,000 people who are, they're worried about how they're going to make their next monthly payment on their home, and we're dickering over what, in the federal budget scheme of things, with trillions of dollars at stake, $5 billion is relatively small. So what is the argument? The argument on the left is that the wall is in some fashion either immoral, which doesn't make sense because we've got walls all over the world that we pay for and fund. We must be building immoral walls in Afghanistan and Syria and other places because we've spent money on it, or that it has some kind of negative impact on our relationship with people who are really largely supported by us. So the Central American governments who are just having horrible times in their own economies are saying, unless you give us more money and we pour billions of dollars in there now. We're going to keep producing drugs and or sending people through Mexico. And Mexico, of course, gets devastated along the way. And it's not that great for the migrants themselves. There's, stories of rape and abuse, and children are dying now at our border. It's just ridiculous. So $5 billion to stop all that seems cheap to me. Seems like chump change, frankly, to me. So that'll get some reaction from somebody because I call that chump change. All right, let's also point out that today, and I learned this from our Cracker Jack staff, is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So if you really want to appreciate your law enforcement, maybe you ought to appreciate the laws they try to enforce, including the fact that you have to stand in line and get in queue in order to immigrate to the country. Officer Singh in California was killed not long ago by an illegal immigrant. You want to honor law enforcement, don't expose them to those dangers. Maybe a wall or a barrier or a steel barrier or more drones or some kind of sophisticated, comprehensive immigration policy. God forbid Congress do what it's actually sworn to do. Might have saved Officer Singh's lives, might have saved lives like Kate Steinle and others as well. So that's the national story of the day. What happens out of this? Probably stalemate. This will go on for a few more days. And there are some predictions about what happens that we'll talk about when we get to our prediction story. But this is not a good thing for our country. Shutting down the government is never something that we should really be focused on doing. We ought to be able to solve the problems without shutting down the government. But that's apparently where we are. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the state. We'll come back, I'm sure, and talk about the southern border a million times this year. Where is the state? Well, you know that we've been telling you over a long haul that the state has all kinds of economic issues and that it is in deep trouble economically. Meanwhile, our new governor says, oh no, we're sitting on a big fat surplus and I got lots of dough in the till, and so I intend to spend it, and we'll tell you how he intends to spend it. But here's an article that came out of California Political News and Views, a place I find a lot of stuff for you, that says California is on the brink. So it talks about its history and about sort of where it is, and I'm going to go through some of it fast because I think the context is kind of interesting, given that Governor Brown has now left his second term and was probably the longest serving governor we ever had when you add up all of his terms. California had a golden era, it said, between 1946 and 1966, or much of my youth, all the way up to the time I graduated high school, believe it or not. During that interval, there were governors of Earl Warren, Goodwin Knight, and Edmund G. Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's dad. Warren and Knight were Republicans. Brown was a Democrat. All are now deceased. And, of course, Pat Brown was Jerry Brown's dad. And Jerry Brown then served from 75 to 83 and 2011 to 2019. And so they do a comparison between the golden era and the current era, and I think it's kind of interesting. From 46 to 66 in what they call the golden era, California population grew rapidly. By the mid-60s, California had become the largest in terms of population, surpassing New York State. In that golden era, people came from all over America, in fact, all over the country, and it wasn't unusual to see license plates from all kinds of other places here during that time. It built a first-class system of higher education, new freeways, and big water projects in that era. Tuition at the University of California reached a whopping $180 a year, not a quarter, a year. Today it's about $13,000 a year. California's coastal region did not have snow or dreary winters, but it did have mountainous areas like Lake Tahoe and Lake Arrowhead where there was skiing. In the milder parts of the state, there was golf and tennis and swimming year-round. Surfing in the waters off our coast became a phenomenon, as did the music of the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean. The image of surfing in California became indelibly etched in the minds of people all over the world. And from 66 to 99, California continued to grow beyond the golden era, they say. In San Francisco, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and near San Jose, California, firms emerged like Apple, Intel, Facebook, and Google that changed the face of the world. No kidding. In August of 2018, Apple reached a market value of $1 trillion, the first company in history to do it. And in that setting, with that background of the golden era, as they describe it in this article of California, they bring you now to where we sit today and give it as contrast. Today, they say California may be on the brink of collapse. A decent home in the coastal area that was once the mecca for surfers may be $1.5 million to $2 million or more. There is statewide a shortage of affordable housing. Recent surveys show that many residents are considering leaving the Golden State, and I have been, as you know, beating the drum about us bleeding our millennials like crazy, maybe because I work with so many, I'm so attuned to it, but you ought to be attuned to it too, because they're your future and they're leaving us like crazy. In June of 2018, the Bay Area Council of Business Group released a survey showing that 46% of Bay Area residents might leave the state. In November of 2018, the weekly publication California Chamber of Commerce noted that 3/4 of the state's voters say they cannot make enough money to enjoy a middle-class lifestyle. California's tax burden is enormous. The state has the nation's highest sales tax, higher than any other state, the highest bracket for state income tax of 13.3%, the second highest gasoline tax, and in November of 2018, as you know, the state's voters rejected an opportunity to lower that by 12 cents a gallon, so that goes to show you where their heads are. In recent years, state government has demanded that local communities build more housing to face a cutoff in funds. Otherwise, they would be imposed with penalties for not reaching the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA as we call it, requiring local governments to create housing. In 17 and 18, the state legislature began imposing more land use controls on local government, trying to encourage that. Assembly Bill 2923 in September of 2018 was signed by Governor Brown, giving BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, to construct high-rise density around its stations, hoping that they could attract young people who would stay around those transportation hubs. Currently, there's a bill, Senate Bill 50, introduced, I think by Senator Knight, if I'm not mistaken, that if enacted would impose additional high-rise, high-density housing construction within a quarter mile of frequently used bus stops or train stations and require that local governments build them. So you know what's going on here now is the state that created the problem, which has driven all of the millennials away and which has driven housing up with their regulations and with all of the environmental processes that they put in place, is now taking over land control for the locals and saying, we created the problem, you're not creating enough housing, we're going to impose on you the rules that we want you to solve the problem we created. That's great of the state. I think that's very generous of them. State workers are given generous pensions and have been over the years. Estimates now show that the money needed to pay for those pensions is simply not available. Gee, I wonder why that happened. No one knows how much extra money might be needed, which is good news. We have a problem. We don't know how much it is. But news media reports say that unfunded pension liabilities range anywhere between, listen to the range that they don't know whether or not is accurate, $250 billion to $1 trillion. Somewhere in there, between $250 billion and $1 trillion of unfunded pension liabilities, we aren't quite sure. Well, don't you think we ought to get our arms around that and get a real answer, legislators? There's 120 of you monkeys up in Sacramento. Can some of you get a calculator and sit down with some experts and figure out what the unfunded liability is? In December of 2018, Governor Brown said that if public agencies in California don't straighten up, they're headed for fiscal oblivion. Well, thanks for that heads up. California's big cities are filled with thousands of homeless people. We see it in all cities now, not just big cities. And places like Google are planning to expand their operations in other states like Texas. California had long been the land of opportunity, but there's no guarantee for opportunity in the future unless there are reforms. It's time to consider living elsewhere. Well, it's beyond time for that for our young generation. They've moved on. Some of our middle class have moved on because they simply can't afford to move up or to educate their kids here. And that's a serious problem. So as we start 2019, we've got a federal issue down on the border where more people are trying to get in here. We already have more people than we can house, and we are in deep debt. There's some good news to start your year. The state's got to get its act together, and that's our state story for the day. All right. We're going to visit some of these things with predictions along the way too, so some of this is going to tie together interestingly. I had to pick a local story, and I decided with all that doom and gloom on our southern border and in our fiscal economy, I would do a happy story for a local story. I think all local news is more important anyway because it's where we live, but this is a happy story for me because, you know, I'm a dog lover, and this is about Orange County, my home county, so I thought I would share it with you. The Orange County Shelter has started a new program called Doggy Playgroups to have the doggies be happier and make it easier for them to be adopted. So there was an article written by Lou Ponzi that I think was published in the Register. I don't know sourcing, I'm sorry. If I find it, I'll tell you. but I believe it's the Register, about what the Orange County Shelter has done. And the Orange County Shelter, as you know, has been moved from the city of Orange to my hometown in Tustin, in much bigger, more modern facility than it's ever had in decades. So, dogs who frolic with other dogs are happy, and happy dogs have fewer behavioral problems. In fact, happy, well-behaved dogs are more adoptable. That's true of people as well. The principles of the foundation of Dogs Playing for Life, a program that was recently launched at the Orange County Animal Shelter, is that making dogs happier makes them more adoptable. In animal sheltering, says Mike Cavani, we have dogs that are unfortunate enough to find themselves homeless and living in an animal shelter, segregated in concrete or metallic containers. Animal care expert Cavani says he launched a program using monitored doggy play groups, and he started that in August. They're bored, they're frustrated, and now we're asking people to adopt them, and we ask the dogs to behave themselves when they meet the people. Dogs in shelters need to have the opportunity to be a dog, to engage the same activities as dogs who are living in loving homes. We give dogs the opportunity to get out there, to play, and to de-stress. Cavani, who has been in animal care for 14 years, was relatively new to the industry when he implemented similar canine play groups at the Irvine Animal Care Center more than a decade ago. This was just more natural, he said. It felt more natural to let the dogs get out and play. It just seemed like the right thing to do for a dog. In 2009, Cavani worked at a shelter in Long Island, New York, under the guidance of Amy Sadler, the founder of Dogs Playing for Life. Sadler had been director of training and behavior at the Longmont Humane Society in Colorado and the Southampton Animal Foundation in New York. Sadler was a trainer, and she was hired to work with dogs at these public shelters, and realized that letting dogs play together in groups made them more responsive to her dog training. Logically, happier and satisfied animals are generally less stressed, which equates to less disease and less extreme behavior that puts people and animals at risk. Subsequently, the shelter started her program so that more animals could play together, and they found more loving homes. Their placements went up. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I gotta talk fast. While running the play groups in Long Island, Cavani said had a notable adoption rate change, and so he instituted it at Austin Pets for Life when he was working there in Texas, and saw the adoptions go from 90 to 99%. So he picked up 10% in adoptions right there. Much more thoughtful adoption matches can be made because we know their personalities and we know how they interact with other dogs. But they're also interacting with people when they play in this process, so we get to know them better than just taking them on the occasional walk. Typically, 40 dogs participate in a monitored 20-minute play group session at the Orange County Shelter. Between 2 to 15 dogs in a single group will play at a time. The facility plans to increase that number over time. The newer, much larger shelter facility opened in Tustin in March with more space for such programs for the dogs. It's too soon to measure the overall impact of the Orange County Animal Care's shelter program, Cavani said, but at least one long-term resident dog was found at a home participating in play groups, and we think the play groups will make a difference. As they get less stressed and have their needs met, they're much happier mentally and physically healthier as a dog. So there's a good news story. The doggies get to play in play groups, and that makes them more adoptable and gets them more homes. And, you know, we might take that up as people. Maybe we should play in more play groups, and then we would have less problems. Start some play groups down on the border. All right. Anyway, trying to tie my stories together when they don't tie together. Let's talk about our feature for today. So let me tell you what we're going to do. In January, we want you to send in all your suggestions. We're only going to do this in the month of January, and then we'll take a look across the rest of the 11 months at how we do. And we want you to tell us what your predictions are for the new year. What do you think will happen in 2019? Your predictions could be about anything. It could be politics and public policy if that's the kind of bent you're in, because that's what this show is awfully focused on most of the time. It can be about entertainment. It can be about sports. It can be about pop culture and fashion. Some of the things we like to talk about. It can be about doggy play groups and whether or not you think they're going to catch fire across the United States. I don't care what your prediction is. Neither does staff. We just want you to send them in so we can enjoy them with you. And I went and I found some, and our staff has given us some, and I want to share some of these for you today. I got a ton of them here. I'll never get them in, especially since CC tells me I'm running low on time. But I wanted to give you some expert predictors' predictions, some of which are astonishing, and then some of our own. So world-renowned psychic Betsy Lewis, who predicted things like George H. Walker Bush's death and predicted, what was the other one she predicted? That he would pass away. There was another one in here I saw that she predicted in 2018 that came through. Oh, that Kavanaugh would be appointed to the bench. Those were some of her predictions. So she's got some batting records. She's made some predictions for 2019 I wanted to share with you. She says President Donald Trump will be reelected in 2020 despite those that want him to fail or want him impeached. She said there are traitors inside his administration that will be leaving the White House like a revolving door. And since she published that, apparently John Kelly announced that he was leaving, and so did General Mattis. I don't know if those were the traitors of whom she speaks, but that was her prediction. She said that on the border wall, Trump will get his way, and he'll get some money for his border wall, but not the $5.7 billion that he's asking for. She sees a lot of anger and violent protests along the Mexican-U.S. border as a result of what he gets and about this dispute. That's probably a realistic assessment of what's going to happen. She says Mueller's ludicrous, that's what she calls it, investigation of Russian interference in 2020 will come to an end, and as she has foreseen, Trump will not be impeached, but there will be talk by Pelosi and Democrats of indictment after he's out of office. All fear tactics, she says. We'll see. She also says that in 2020, Trump will put forth an idea. This is one of the ones I find a little astonishing, but maybe, who knows. In 2020, Trump will put forth an idea to make the United States debt-free. Now realize the federal government is $20 trillion in debt. I can't even begin to tell you how much 20 trillion is. It's a huge number. Back when it was 12 trillion, I used to tell undergraduates that I would lecture that if you took 12 thin paper dollar bills, 12 trillion of them, and you put them on the ground, started on the floor of this very room, and stacked 12 trillion of them together, you could get from the Earth to the moon and back 4 times. So that's how much 12 trillion is. We're now at 20 trillion, so that's mind-boggling. Thanks, Cece. So anyway, he is going to get us debt-free, she says. He'll put a plan in place on 2020 that will be announced. Oh, I'm sorry. She says that it will be announced in 2019, and that in 2020 he'll put the plan in place, and that he is going to show us how we're going to get debt-free in a very short period of time. Okay, I'm waiting for that plan. What else did she predict? She predicted that there will be lots of people coming from Central America to the border, and that will begin the conflagration that she talked about earlier, and that there will be violence along the border, and I'm sorry to hear that prediction. I hope that's wrong. She says that if anything happens to Trump during 2019, the stock market will plummet. So I don't know what that's about, but we'll see what she means. And then here's a couple of interesting ones or astonishing ones that she made that I want to share with you, and then we'll go to some other predictors. She said at some point, Melania will separate from Donald Trump, probably between 2020 and 2024. So let's track that one. That she says is going to happen because Melania is an independent spirit. She was born on April 26, 1970, making her a strong Taurus and a very rebellious spirit. So we'll see whether she leaves Donald. And then in another astonishing prediction, I don't know how she would know this, but somewhere around March 15th, birthday of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she will pass, she says. So we hope she's wrong about that one. Anyway, so that's it from Betsy Lewis. We'll track Betsy and see how smart she is. I'm going to give these to Erica, and she'll track all of these things. All right. Here's some from something called Future Forecast. GM will have self-driving cars available in 2019 that will start providing ride-sharing services to compete with Uber and Lyft. Automated Uber. How about that? Harley Davidson will finally release its first electric motorcycle. Okay, it's called Project Livewire. Volvo will stop making all petrol-fueled cars and will only design electric vehicles. So there you go. The Swedes are going to go all electric. Foldable phones will make a comeback in 2019, especially foldable smartphones. So you're going to have a flip smartphone. I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll look forward to those. They'll probably be from Apple, and they'll probably be $1,200. So, plan ahead. There will be significant economic recession impacts in early 2019. That's good news. Glad to hear that. Yikes. And Tesla will produce 500,000 cars for the first time in 1 year. How many do they produce a year now? Somebody on my Cracker Jack staff, find out how many Tesla cars we produced in 18. But we're going up to 500,000 in 2019, says Future Forecast. All right. And then I had to do this before I get to my staffs. How much time do I have left, Cece? Oh, no. So I will do some of this, guys, in another episode more repeatedly, but there's somebody called the Time Traveler. Now, he's made predictions because he's already been to 2030. He time traveled up there and then sort of looked around at what was going on, and so when he looked back, he could figure out what was happening in 2019, and he was telling us some of the things that are happening. I'll only share one with you, and you'll see why the Time Traveler is going to be a lot of fun. The aliens are coming this year. We're gonna meet the aliens. He says they're coming in 2019. They're going to land here. They're actually going to be friendly, and we're going to become friends with them. We're going to invite them to come on in because we don't have enough immigration. So we thought we'd bring some aliens in, right? And we'll help them with some federal programs. But they have bold skin. They're very slender-like, but their bold skin is really futuristic, and we'll like it. So there you go. We'll do more of the Time Traveler because he's interesting. I read him late last night, and I promise you, without the aid of booze, he was very interesting to read. So what did our staff come up with? And I will tell you who the predictors were, which they don't know I was going to do to them. And the rest of my staff, you owe me predictions. Here's some from our staff. Betty, who, as you know, is an expert in Latino relations and has a lot of her time spent in our outreach that we do in the minority communities, and she does that for a lot of our clients, says there are going to be some examples of millennials, second generation Latino, as she calls them. I don't know why they're second generation. It seems to me like they might be third or fourth generation Latinos in some cases, but they're longing to go back to their roots of their culture, and so we're going to see a lot more celebrations in 2019 of things like Dia de los Muertos celebrations, Loteria games printed on everything. I don't know what that is, but I'm interested in them because it's a game. Bilingual books for kids, clothing with Mexican motifs. We're going to come back. Lots of Latino music. We already have a lot of that. Latino celebrities in Hollywood. Don't we have a ton of those? A fusion of Mexican foods and traditional Mexican parties. I'm all over that as long as there's tamales available or street tacos. Okay, fashion trends predictions. This came from our producer Erica. Black will once again be the new black. So goodbye to whatever there was the black last year. We're going back to traditional black. Early 2000s style low-rise jeans will resurface, says Julie. Really, low rises? Oh, man. All right. According to Erica, millennials will continue to get blamed for issues they had no hand in. That sounds like a little grousing. I think they're responsible for soda pop going away. I think they really are. All right. And entertainment predictions. Here's some from pop culture. See, you got to send these kind of predictions in. Podcasts will gain popularity. Duh. And you should be signing up, by the way, on iPod or Podbean to pick up Java with Jerry on a podcast if you're a podcast fan. And streaming services like Netflix and Hulu will continue to grow with implementation of their own original content, and that will be interesting because they're always so content hungry. They're going to have their own original stuff, I guess, that they're going to add to. And more streaming services will be launched, causing us as consumers to feel a bit overwhelmed, or maybe causing competition, which is always good for the economy. So where am I now in time? Do I have time? I have enough time to just give you your millennial word for the day. And so I picked this phrase because I thought it would be fun. Where is it? What did I do with it? And it sort of relates to the predictions, some of which that were made that were a little extreme, like the aliens coming in to move in and be our friends. And that's that, as millennials say, I can't even. What does that mean? Well, when you're exasperated or you can't find an appropriate way to deal with something and there's just no accurate response, you just say in exasperation, I can't even. And when I read some of these predictions, I can't even. So you send me yours, and we'll talk about some more of these through January, and then we'll track them. We'll see how right we are. We'll see if black is a new black, Erica, and whether or not millennials keep getting blamed for things disappearing from our economy, and whether or not Ruth Bader Ginsburg makes it past March 15th. I hope she does, and hope she feels better from her cancer stuff. Hope you're having a good year, and that you're overcoming whatever challenges you have in your life, and you'll be back next Wednesday. We'll have a good show for you, I promise, and we'll have more Java with Jerry. See you next week.